Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, in which we actually get the first occurrence of the Greek word for Genesis. Haute he biblos geneseos uranu kai ges hate ageneta he hemera epoies en hatheos ton uranon kai tain gain. Let's begin with this demonstrative pronoun that kicks things off. You'll see this is the nominative singular feminine form, and it is the demonstrative. Even though it's sneaky here, you got to notice the rough breathing. So this is the demonstrative this, it's not she, and it's pointing forward to its antecedent here, which is he biblos. Now, biblos might look like a masculine noun with that os ending, but this is essentially a second declension feminine form. Biblos means scroll, typically in antiquity, or book, sometimes even record. So this is the book, we'll go with that. And then we have Geneseos, and this is famously Genesis, as you can see right here. This is where we get the name of the book from the Greek. Now, in Hebrew, if you studied this before, this is Toledot, and there's going to be a bunch of these in Genesis as a way to sort of frame the genealogies and the retellings of the history of God's people in Genesis. And so Genesis is used numerous times as we go throughout the book. This is the first occurrence. And it's the book of the Genesis, or the book of the origins, if you will, of Uranu Kai Ges. This is referring all the way back to Genesis 1:1, the totality of creation, heaven and earth. And then, nice little summary clause here, hate, which is when, egeneta. This is referring back to the multiple times we saw ginomai being used in Genesis 1 here in the third singular aorist middle, as a way of summarizing how everything came into existence through the Word of God. So it's not like when it came into being. It's singular because it's picking up on essentially a neuter plural entity as its subject. Then we have an interesting phrase here, he hemera. You may be thinking, well, this seems odd. Why is there a relative pronoun here, which is sort of pointing forward to hemera, which is both of them, as you can tell, are in the dative? Why do you need the relative pronoun? Well, strictly speaking, you don't. You could simply just say hemera in the dative, the day in which, or the day which God made, using poieo here. This form of the relative pronoun is called pleonastic, or sometimes it's referred to as a redundant. It's a redundant antecedent. It's not strictly necessary. It is relatively common in the Septuagint. It often picks up on a Hebrew form. It is pointing forward, if you will, to the actual antecedent. And so it's pleonastic. It's fuller. It's redundant. So it's the day in which God made. And this, of course, once again goes back to Genesis 1:1, where God made heaven and earth. And we have that repeated, the heaven and the earth. So this is the book of the Genesis of heaven and earth, on which, or when it came to pass, on the day in which God made the heaven and the earth. Now, this biblos geneseos might sound familiar if you've done some reading in the Greek New Testament. Very famously, Matthew 1:1 begins with the exact same phrase. You'll notice biblos geneseos there, the book of the genealogy. In this case, it's of Jesus, son of David, son of Abraham. And Matthew here, starting off, and at least the way we organize the New Testament, starting off the New Testament, going back to how Genesis starts off here in chapter 2. This genesis is used multiple times in Genesis. This form is also used in First Chronicles for the genealogy. So a lovely little way in which the evangelist Matthew is sort of pointing back to a common genealogical frame of reference from the book of Genesis as a way to kick off his own gospel. In some sense, you could say this is the Genesis of old creation, if you will. Now Matthew's getting into the Genesis of new creation, which is going to be centered on, of course, Jesus Christ.